If you need to get some sunshine on you, I don't know if it's raining outside, maybe some drops of rain to ground you again. Otherwise, take a nice deep breath. And exhale. Another deep breath. And exhale.
We're going to keep moving on testimonials. Just wanted to take a moment to set us up for our last sort of series of testimonials here, and thank all of these healthcare workers and folks who are supporting initiatives regarding healthcare for your incredibly brave and painful testimonies. And we know that each of those testimonies that you shared, for each of those, there are thousands and thousands more unshared. And so we must continue to witness, to listen, to raise Palestinian voices, and raise our voices. We know that what happens abroad impacts us here. And with that, we will move to hear about how the question of Palestine and the destructive nature of Zionism impacts us here as people, as local communities, and as the UC. And I want to welcome the students from my campus, UC Santa Cruz, to please come up here.
Hi, while we're all getting settled in up here, I just wanted to give a round of applause to Steve for his speech. That was amazing. Thank you, Steve. We want to sit.
Just as a brief content warning, this will be dealing with police brutality. If anyone is feeling uncomfortable with that, do whatever you need to do. And yeah, as the intro said, this is what we see at our campuses here in the United States. After 30 days of a different world, one where lives were centered on the liberation of Palestine and oppressed people everywhere, and centered on acknowledging the genocide that our university perpetuates and financially benefits from, where over 200 students, many of whom facing food insecurity, ate 3 meals a day. 30 days where people were provided sleeping arrangements and accommodations at no charge, where a dedicated safety team protected those committed to labor within the encampment. 30 days of art existing through music, on floors, upon walls, and the banners and barricades of resistance and the dances we shared. Lives remembered and celebrated, prayers and offerings common and welcome. For 31 days, this community, in solidarity with Gaza and all other encampments of 2024, provided. After 30 days of a different world, my little brother called me at 11:50 p.m. on May 30th. He refrained, "There are so many cops, there are so many cops. They look like stormtroopers, there are so many cops." Whistles were blown, Comrades dropped everything and sprinted, yelling for support and gathering together in a small group against the 200 plus 17 police department thick army of riot police descending from all around. They destroyed everything in their path, marching through our altar, over our tents in which we lived, ripping down artwork and supplies. Medical tent fell to uncaring boots and batons. A couple cops got into an apparent fight with our food tent, throwing sandwiches and what was tomorrow's breakfast onto the floor in some sort of misplaced anger. The cops surrounded our encampment on nearly every side, painstakingly inching their way around us, yelling inaudible orders and erecting floodlights. Members of our community showed out in the early AMs and dotted the hills of lower campus with lights from their cameras. The first arrest of the night occurred around 1 a.m. on May 31st. A police officer tackled a student uninvolved with the encampment off of his bike, claimed he was drunk, and unceremoniously threw him into the paddy wagon. What preceded was a grueling 9-hour police standoff. Comrades for hours screamed their voices hoarse, chanting, dissuading the fear of unarmed students facing down an entire army. Exchanges between police officer and protester, lamenting, "We keep us safe," while officers returned, "We are going to hurt you." Hannah.
At around 3 a.m. on May 31st, after hours of relentless antagonizing from rows and rows of faceless police officers, an officer in front of me began stabbing his baton repeatedly into my breast area. I remember yelling at him before the assault, asking how his family and his children would feel about not only his act of brutalizing students, but his complicity in upholding and protecting a system that is committing genocide and dropping bombs on the homes of families just like his. Despite my cries of pain and inability to move, he shifted his aim from my chest to my ribs. Officers to my left began attacking my comrades, attempting to pull people out of the line to arrest them. Seeing that I was being pulled forward and unable to step back, he seized the opportunity to apply even more force. He began stabbing my ribs with full force, lifting me to my toes with each blow. After going hours without food and water and being sleep deprived from the consistent psychological torture inflicted by the UC, I used every bit of my energy I had to scream at him, begging him to stop, crying out that he was hurting me. He didn't stop, but instead he moved his baton to under my rib cage. I remember feeling a sensation of my rib cage lifting, putting unbearable pressure on my chest. As if the jabs weren't enough, he began twisting the baton left and right, and even through thick layers of clothing, he teared the surface of my skin on my lower abdomen. Eventually, he stopped as the line of officers were cycling out. The only thing keeping me physically standing in that moment was the physical support of my comrades around me. I stood there for about 15 minutes, hoping that my inability to breathe would figure itself out. Getting worse by the minute, I left the line to offer support from the inner circle. After 15 more minutes, with my capacity to breathe degrading and a sharp pain persisting with every attempted breath, a peer convinced me to seek emergency attention. We rushed to the hospital where I was given pain medication and underwent tests to ensure no internal damage was sustained. Weeks after the assault, I was still struggling to breathe properly, with major bruising on my ribs and stomach.
I'm speaking on behalf of a comrade who could not be here today, who was part of press and media during the police raid. I am deeply traumatized and disturbed both as a witness and a victim of police violence at UCSC following the raid on the encampment for Palestine. Watching my peers endure severe mistreatments at the hands of police that day has left me with deep scars, and in addition, while documenting for student media, I was pushed to the ground by a UCPD officer, resulting in a concussion from hitting my head on the concrete. The recovery process lasted 2 months, during which I suffered from sharp stabbing head pains, persistent nausea, extreme sensitivity to light and sound, and significant difficulty focusing on reading and screen use. The physical and emotional toll of that experience set me back academically, forcing me to take 2 incompletes in my courses. The police violence that day was an abuse of authority, and there needs to be accountability. Students should not face violence and brutality on their own campus for exercising their right to peaceful protest.
Throughout the night, police rushed the line about every 20 minutes, flailing their batons, grabbing hair, necks, tearing off clothes in such a frenzy that their supervisors had to physically drag them back into position and break them away from the students. Sunrise broke around 7 a.m. as police demanded press leave the altercation and positioned their bodies around especially brutal arrests to avoid exposing their violence. Femmes of color especially were pointed at, told "you're next," and then ripped from the line. Organizers leading chants and waving flags to uphold morale, and those breaking line to reposition comrades in an effort to ensure the safety of everyone were also explicitly targeted. Parker?
At 7:30 a.m., I was arrested. I had been a target since 1 a.m. due to showing my comrades and my friends how to avoid getting their hands broken. UC Riverside officer, UCPD Officer Wade Stern began to pull me by my legs and my neck for the 5th time that night. He pushed me backwards and I slipped and my leg shot out. He called it a kick and half dozen officers began to grab me at every single part of my body. Finally, Officer Wade Stern lifted me off my feet by the holes in the top of my helmet, my neck, my jaw, and my shoulders, and slammed me face first into the asphalt. I was knocked out for the better half of a minute. Had I not been wearing a helmet, I cannot imagine how much damage would have been done. I was pressed into the ground, breathing in gravel. I had rocks in my mouth, and my arms were wrestled behind me as they pressed down on my back and my hips. They put on the Ziploc cuffs and tightened them as far as they would go, cutting off circulation into my hands. I was then carried onto the sheriff bus as my friends around me screamed for help because I was clearly unconscious and could not focus or walk. I was unceremoniously loaded on and actively deteriorating, denied medical help and any basic necessities, and subjected to auditory torture on a sheriff bus for 3 hours. By the time we arrived and my cuffs were removed, my hands were black and purple, and the damage had been done. I had a fractured wrist and extensive nerve damage in my hands. I still to this day cannot feel anything in my fingertips. 3 days later, as I was rendered homeless due to my ban from campus, which was both my home and my place of work, I had a stroke. I was rushed to the hospital where I stopped breathing on the drive and I had to be resuscitated and my heart restarted in the hospital at Santa Cruz. I woke up with complete retrograde amnesia. I could not remember my name, where I was from, my parents' name, or who I loved. To this day, the effects of the UC's violence does not end. I have physical damage, nerve damage, mental damage. I cannot think, learn, read, or love the same way that I did before this event. I still continue to have seizures on a regular basis due to this event, and I'm completely incapacitated in academic-wise and in my life. I have never experienced this kind of violence, and it is nothing in comparison to everything that people have faced and everything Palestinians have faced. And the UCPD and the UC's complicity in all of this is atrocious.
At 8:30 a.m., the final arrest circle was illegally kettled at the base of campus. Comrades were subsisting at this point off of bites of food, sips of water, and zero sleep. I was told after being ripped from the line by 3 officers that them hauling me out was going to hurt. After clearing the circle, the police and UCSC invited in bulldozers to raise the camp and took squad pictures among the destruction. Protesters were thrown into 3 different buses with 3 different flavors of abuse, from auditory torture, forcing protesters to take out tampons and piss on buses, constant homophobia, transphobia, and egregious racial profiling. A complete dehumanization of protesters that stayed peaceful throughout the night. No, that doesn't even matter. It does not matter. But still, some without access to food, water, or bathroom from 12 in the morning to 9 in the morning. They were kept on these buses from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. without the ability to relieve themselves. Just a taste of what the fuck is happening in Palestine. Just a small amount. And the people here who are all up on this stage, that was something they looked at. They looked at Palestine and they said, No, this is not going to be happening, especially if we are at an institution that is actively benefiting from this oppression. We are willing to take up this labor because it is an ounce, a fraction of what is happening across this whole entire world. Lila?
After being arrested at 6 a.m., after being restricted from food and water and the use of a restroom for 9 hours, I was arrested at 6 a.m. and put on a bus. After being placed in a cell with the females and the whatevers, we were then shuttled off to the county jail. As students screamed to use the restroom and asked to have their cuffs just a little bit released from the pressure, police officers then turned up music that was so loud and so staticky that we couldn't even hear ourselves think. This was after 9 hours of no sleep, no water, and no use of restrooms. Then, as we were taken to the county jail, we sat in a parking lot for 2 hours, and we were just told to sit there and wait. And as we waited, comrades on the bus had to deal with nerve damage from handcuffs, from being able to just sit there with our hands behind our backs for 2 hours. And as it was just stated, this is just not even barely an ounce of what people in Palestine had to face. And this abuse was allowed because of the work that was being done for Palestine. Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna scoot this over so everyone can be seen. Sorry, love. Is there a next slide? Or no? No? Okay. Okay. The university lied. Of course. The university said that plaintiffs will receive extensive accommodations to minimize any purported harm. Lies. 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 The university said that plaintiffs were not caught in Dragnet. Lies.
Lies.
The university said that UCSC made individualized determinations as to the threat passed by each plaintiff's continued presence on campus. Lies.
Lies.
The university said officers did not use excessive force during the arrest. Lies. But if you don't ask us, let's ask the students. Who here was arrested? Who here experienced police violence? Due to the arrest, who lost on-campus housing? Who here lost access to their meal plans and was hungry? Who here was left with medical bills? Who here did not receive online accommodations for their schoolwork or finals? Who here failed their classes? Who here lost access to on-campus health care? Who here was denied an individualized hearing? Who here has not stopped and will not stop fighting for the Palestinian liberation movement? Intifada, Intifada, long live the Intifada. Thank you. Oh, do you want to do it? Oh. This one is just that during the raid, 14 police departments came down, 14 from San Diego to San Francisco. And like Santa Clara, they have cross-trained with Israel to quote-unquote combat terrorism. and to view Israel's police and military strategies. So it's all connected. Yeah, shame. Thank you.
You know, it's such an honor to be at Santa Cruz and to work alongside and to organize alongside students that have this much clarity. And so I just wanted to say that. I mean, I'm going to speak a little bit about, we're moving into the Helen Diller Family Foundation territory. And we want to be able to speak about the many different ways in which this foundation impacts the university. It has a philanthropic face. You know, it donated, $1.15 billion went to UCSF, and there is a state-of-the-art cancer hospital that bears the Diller name. But there's also a murky underside, and we really have to attend to that too. And what I'm going to share with you is a story about how the Diller Foundation has funded Zionist organizations that have placed ethnic studies in their crosshairs. And you might ask, why ethnic studies? And so what we're seeing right now is a kind of politics, a dominant politics in which there is safe space discourse that is getting wielded to make arguments that anything having to do with Palestine imperils the safety of Jewish community members of the UC. So this is a lie. I mean, Santa Cruz, I think, is representative in that the encampment was 30% anti-Zionist Jewish students. And, but I want to say about the Diller Foundation, like, why would they place ethnic studies in their crosshairs or fund an organization that actually is known for doing this? UMCA, right? And the reason is that with the passage of AB 101, the legislation mandating ethnic studies in high school education, there was a model curriculum that was developed, and many people here know this very intimately. And what happened was, in the model curriculum, there was a module that dealt with it was an Arab American Studies module that dealt with the occupation of Palestine, that mentioned BDS, that also mentioned apartheid, that mentioned settler colonialism. And what happened was Newsom, although he signed AB 101 into law, he and Tony Thurmond, both figures that have a lot to do with the UC, that serve an ex officio status as regents, basically what they did was they placed guardrails around ethnic studies. What this meant was that there could be no room within a field of study for even the mention of Palestine and Palestinians, that there had to be a securitized enclosure around education so that Palestine couldn't even enter into the order of knowledge. And one of the worst organizations is an organization called UMCA. And UMCA is actually based out of Santa Cruz. So it's local to us, unfortunately. And so you could see that UMCA very proudly states that its chief goal is to combat anti-Semitism at US universities, and chief among its targets is ethnic studies. Next slide, please. So this person here is Tammy Rossman Benjamin. Totally, yep. So Tammy Rossman Benjamin, before ethnic studies even existed as a program or a department at Santa Cruz, kept targeting Middle East studies, because there could be no area of the university where there could be any critical study of Zionism or Palestine, right? And so what happened was, over a decade ago, on our campus, before there was Students for Justice in Palestine, there was Committee for Justice in Palestine, and Tammy Rossman Benjamin, in a video that was posted online by her supporters, was actually, she stated that SJP and the Muslim Students Association are not your average student associations. And then here she said, like, the Young Democrats or the Young Republicans, and I don't even know any campus that has those clubs on it, right? And so what she stated was that she said that these are organizations that have a lot of foreign students who come to this country with an agenda. And then, so she said that they come to this country with an agenda, and she said, and they have active ties to terrorist organizations. So she terrorist baited these organizations, these student organizations, and then this is how she describes Palestinians, Muslims, and Arabs. She said, anti-Semitism is how they think about the world. And so, like, what she's basically saying is that there could be no, like, anything. She's basically making an identitarian claim about Palestinianness, saying that it is, by definition, anti-Semitic. So anything having to do with Palestine has to be securitized. It has to be enclosed. It has to be excluded. It cannot be admitted into the university. It cannot be in the realm of public and critical conversation. It can never, ever enter into the order of knowledge. Next slide. So these are the priorities of UMCA. Confronting anti-Semitic critical ethnic studies. Okay, like, in other words, if ethnic studies gets anti-imperialist, no way. And here's the other thing. Ethnic studies, it centers the study of structures and systems of power from the perspective of the communities that are the most impacted. That's dangerous, okay? And then, like, countering academic BDS and anti-Zionist faculty, and then protection for Jewish students, right? And then here, you don't count if you're anti-Zionist and you're Jewish, okay? Okay, next slide. And so these are some of the areas that UMCA has targeted in recent years: Area A through G/H ethnic studies at the UC. UMCA infiltrated the process. The Daily Bruin reported about this. CREZ at UC Santa Cruz, this is a department that I used to chair, and I worked with students to help bring into being, and the UC Ethnic Studies Faculty Council. And in fact, she writes letters to the Legislative Jewish Caucus with 150 different sort of Zionist organizations, and she also writes to the regions. And this matters because with the Legislative Jewish Caucus and the regions, this has a shaping influence on the UC. These are the ways in which the UC is complicit. Next slide. The UC aligns with organizations like this that are funded by the Helen Diller Family Foundation. So she talks about the anti-Zionism of critical ethnic studies, and she says that so she conflates anti-Zionism in that usual move with anti-Semitism. And she says that, okay, ethnic studies is polarizing. Okay, I would say no, because I think that we all have a stake in each other's freedom, okay? So, but she says that, but it's particularly threatening to, and she makes this claim, Jewish students. And so the safe space discourse, time and again, she's someone who actually filed a Title VI lawsuit with the Office of Education many years ago. It failed. She continues to wage a kind of lawfare against anything and everything. Okay, yeah, let's go to the next slide. So here, because I'm affiliated with the UC Ethnic Studies Faculty Council, CRES, and Area A through G/H, she put me in the crosshairs. It's not me, but it's ethnic studies as a space for critical study of Zionism, as well as Palestinian knowledge, right, and experience. And so she said that that basically I was making claims. She said because of her efforts, some school districts have been adopting her anti-Israel curriculum, including Hayward, Santa Ana, and Castro Valley. Okay, wait, no, you know what? I wish I could take credit for this, but I can't be everywhere at once. This is not me, okay? Next slide. And then she said, so she wrote to the regents, and she said, professor drafting California's ethnic studies standard runs it's for being part of the Institute for the Critical Study of Zionism. And then, isn't it lovely that they added a photo of me? Only, I hope you could tell that's not me. And then, in the feedback loop, you could see that the Canary Mission took that photo and use that too, okay? I feel sorry for that person. That person is a real estate agent in Beverly Hills. Okay. I think that this is it. Is there another slide? I think this is it. Oh yeah, so anyhow, I forgot to say this. So last year, UMCA actually spearheaded a campaign to get me fired and propelled 2,000 people in an AstroTurf campaign to write in and to say that I was blatantly anti-Semitic and dangerous, that I was brainwashing youth, that I spread hatred, that I've created a toxic and terrifying environment, that I indoctrinate people, and that I spread false information. Who knows during these times? These are the things that we have to contend with. But I feel, I just want to give you a small sense, and really even, this is what I'll say, is that, you know, during times like these, it really, we have the courage that comes and the strength that comes from our comrades. And with attacks like this, we have to think about this beyond the sort of individuals who are attacked. What is being attacked and why? This reminds me something of what Vicky Wong was saying. What is the source of the attack? What are they attacking and why? And we have to ask that question too. But I'm going to pass things over to Jaws.
Can we actually go back to the last slide? So thank you, Christine. I just wanted to highlight just a few things. The Tammy Rossman Benjamin person literally is just a disgruntled former UCSC employee that just hates UCSC and is so focused on us that she created an entire organization to attack anti-Zionist formations on campus. And so just to, we already kind of got a sense of who she is, but this is an op-ed she wrote in 2015, which is why campus anti-racism protests are bad for the Jews. So we're here as Jews Against White Supremacy at UCSC, here to strongly refute such a claim, and we won't get into it, but I just want to highlight that AMCA is not the only one. There is a litany of organizations like this that claim that they are anti-hate, that they, fight against bigotry or whatever words they use, and then this is the kind of stuff they put out. So it's one of many Zionist counterinsurgency organizations that are encased in this liberal language of anti-hate. ADL is another good example, JCRC, whatever. But if you look at their database of anti-Semitism, all it is the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department at UCSC, Jews Against White Supremacy at UCSC, and Students for Justice in Palestine at UCSC. I challenge you in their 168 cases of anti-Semitism at UCSC to find one that is actually anti-Semitic. And so, yeah, next slide. So the reason we're focusing on AMCA is that we're going to move into the Helen Diller, also known as Killer Diller Foundation, because obviously the Helen Diller Foundation funds AMCA, and AMCA is a good example because on the one hand, UCSC is taking money from the Helen Diller Foundation for Jewish studies for their foundation from an organization that is taking the same money and giving it to organizations that are actively fighting students and formations at UCSC. So it's like this weird, campus is taking money for its benefit, and then also this money is also implicated in literally attacks against students, faculty. Anyways, so yeah. Oh, next slide. This is just a photo of a lot of war criminals on one slide. Breaking ground for the Helen Diller Hospital. And so, yeah, we have Nancy Pelosi, London Breed, Michael Drake, the gang. Exactly. And so, as you can see, Helen Diller on the one hand does shit like this, but then we're gonna dive deeper into what they actually fund. And this is more of just them saving face to really hide what they are truly about.
So the Helen Diller Foundation claims itself to be a supportive, healing, educational space for cultural arts and global Jewish needs. These are all lies. Sure, the Killer Diller Foundation may fund some hospitals and art museums, but this is all to mask its contributions to Zionist, reactionary, and far-right white supremacist organizations and formations directly, I can't read what that says. Responsible for the genocide in Palestine. By Jewish needs, Killer Diller means Zionist Jewish needs, not anti-Zionist Jewish needs. We resolutely reject this anti-Semitic conflation.
Oh. Yeah, so this is just a fraction of the orgs that are funded by Helen Diller from 2010 to 2021. Here's just a little highlight reel of where the Helen Diller money is going. So as you can see, they donated $130,000 to Christians United for Israel, which is the, I believe, the largest private Zionist organization in the US. Founded and led by insane televangelist John Hagee. If any of y'all are familiar with how batshit insane he is, it's nuts. Yeah, they gave $40,000 to the Amcha Initiative, which we've learned about as a Zionist counterinsurgency organization on college campuses. They gave $50,000 to Friends of the IDF, which is a benefit organization for the genocidal veterans who fucking kill Palestinians every single day. Need I say more on that? They gave $100,000 to the Shurat Hadin Israel Law Center, which is a Tel Aviv-based law firm committed to defending the Zionist state in court and just stamping out any anti-Zionist and pro-Palestinian advocacy in the courtroom. They gave, oh my God, that's a big number. I'm really bad at reading big numbers, but they gave $1,975,000 to the Israel Project, which is just a big tent pro-Israel NGO. Their whole thing is Israel, and yeah. They gave $50,000 to the Middle East Media Research Institute, which, despite its name, is actually a Zionist propaganda front, which is founded and funded by Israeli ex-intelligence. And then they gave $600,000 to JINSA, which we'll get into a little bit more in this presentation. But basically what they do is fund trips to Israel for US military personnel to strengthen relations, and also train genocide heirs to be even more genocidal. So this is, if you click, maybe we still have it. But anyway, this is just a small handful of Zionist organizations funded by Helen Keller. So, yeah.
So this is the Jewish Institute for National Security. JINSA is dedicated to advancing U.S. national security interests in the Middle East, of which a critical pillar is a robust U.S.-Israel security relationship. JINSA believes that Israel is the most capable and critical U.S. security partner in the 21st century, and that a strong America is the best guarantor of Western civilization. Not it. JINSA advances its mission by conducting both educational programs that build ties among American, Israeli, and other Middle Eastern partner military leaders, along with in-depth research and actionable recommendations to influence U.S. policy.
Shame. Next slide. So between, as we established on the last slide, between 2010, 2021, the Helen Diller Foundation has given $600,000 to JINSA. JINSA is the AIPAC of the imperialist military alliance between the Zionist state and the U.S. through facilitating collaboration and unconditional allegiance between the IOF and the U.S. military-industrial complex. This is why it's called the Helen Keller Foundation. JINSA is also calling for a new NATO, but for the Zionist state. Yeah, boom. Diller funds hospitals at UCSF to mask the blood that flows from the bombed hospitals of Gaza. It directly facilitates through its funding of JINSA.
We just wanted to do another highlight reel for some more organizations that are funded by Helen Diller. Something that all of these have in common is that they are registered as hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yay! Helen Diller gave $160,000 to the American Freedom Law Center, which is I forgot to finish that slide, but it is a self-described Judeo-Christian law firm committed to, you can go on their website for the exact wording, but it's all just a bunch of like Islamophobic shit and how they're dedicated to like stopping Islam taking over America and its Judeo-Christian values or whatever, I don't know. There is the American Freedom Defense Initiative that received $160,000 from Helen Diller, and all I'm going to say about what you need to know about this organization, what they do, is that it's also known as Stop Islamization of America. Helen Diller gave $235,000 to the Center for Security Policy, which is a right-wing Zionist anti-Islam think tank. They gave $20,000 to Cultures and Context Incorporated, which doesn't have a lot of information about it online, but if you do enough digging, you'll find that it is a hate group based out of Florida that is responsible for funding a large part of Turning Point USA. They gave $1,150,000, okay, we did it, to the David Horowitz Freedom Center, which is another right-wing anti-Islam think tank, which is responsible for propagating a lot of very, very Islamophobic publications. And then, speaking of Turning Point, Helen Diller gave $25,000 to Turning Point USA. For those unfamiliar, those are the conservative dipshit assholes who go around college campuses being assholes and famously brought Kyle Rittenhouse to speak at the University of Memphis. So, shame. Next slide. Max, I think it's
Okay, so we just wanted to offer this resource. Ooh, it might be tough to scan because of the text, but yeah, basically, comrades have put together a database of organizations. It's not complete, but it is quite extensive of Helen Keller Diller funded organizations from 2010 to 2021. As we've been over almost $9 million has been given to Zionist anti-Palestinian groups. And then that David Horowitz Freedom Center that we just mentioned. I mean, this is just a taste of the kinds of organizations that they're funding. I'm not even going to read that, but that was given $1,150,000 by the Helen Diller Foundation, the same foundation that claims it cares about health, whatever, art, parks. Fuck them. So yeah, if you want the list, you can try scanning that. I'm not sure it's going to work though. Next slide. Okay, so, we're here to demand that the UC end its complicity in genocide against Palestinians, right? And that includes divesting from Diller, right? Jewish Studies Department at UCSC, the UCSC Foundation, and countless other academic departments across the UC receive direct funding from the same formation that oils the imperialist Zionist machine and wages war against any and all movements for justice, whether it be CREZ at UCSC or Students for Justice in Palestine nationally. So divest from Killer Diller. And if you want to sign our petition, we have a campaign to try and get UCSC at least to divest from Diller. You can scan this QR code and sign our petition, please. Thank you.